The auctioneer had already lifted his gavel when Nell Hartley raised her card again. The room went quiet in the space of one breath. Everyone at the county tax sale knew her as the Dairywoman from the River Road. They had watched her lose the hay ground an hour earlier to the co-op's deeper pockets. Now she was bidding against Merrick Paving for the old Calder Quarry. And nobody could figure out why. Ray Kessler bid for the paving company in a pressed gray shirt. He raised the number twice more, then shook his head and sat down. The gavel came down on Nell. The auctioneer grinned over his glasses at the crowd. "Congratulations, Mrs. Hartley," he said. "You just bought the biggest stock pond in the county." The room laughed. Nell signed the papers without smiling and paid the back taxes in full. A tax deed is a strange way to buy land. The county was not selling the quarry so much as selling the debt on it. The Calder family had stopped paying taxes on the pit years ago, after the stone market went soft and the pumps went quiet, when the county forecloses on unpaid taxes. The minimum bid is simply the taxes owed plus fees. There is no warranty and no promises. Whatever the parcel carries, good or bad, the buyer carries next. Nell had spent a winter learning exactly what this parcel carried. She had not learned it from the auction flyer. Months before the sale, she paid for a title search and walked the boundary with the plat in her hand. A tax deed can clear the old owner's mortgage in her state, but it does not clear everything. She checked for federal liens and found none. She checked the mineral rights and found them intact with the surface. And she wrote to the state about the Hall Road, because a permit on paper is only worth what the agency says it still is. The answer came back in 2 lines. The permit was current. It ran with the land. Kessler stopped her at the door. He was polite about it, which somehow made it worse. "You overpaid for a hole full of water," he said. "We priced that rock down to the ton. The good ledge is worked out. Whatever you think is down there, it isn't." Nell shifted the deed folder under her arm. "I didn't buy it for the rock," she said. Kessler waited for more. She let him wait, and walked out into the cold parking lot alone. Her husband Tom was quieter about it that night, which was his own kind of loud. The Hartleys milked 80 cows on ground Nell's grandfather had cleared. The milk check came once a month, and it came thin. Commodity milk pays the same whether the farmer is careful or careless. And the price had been sliding for 3 years. Every dairy on their road was one bad spring from a herd dispersal notice in the paper. Tom looked at the deed on the kitchen table for a long time. "We needed that hay ground," he said. "Instead, we own a swimming pool for catfish." Nell laid her year of notebooks beside the deed. "Tell me what you saw down there," he said at last. So she told him. Nell's grandfather had cut stone in the Calder pit as a young man. He used to say the galleries kept their own weather. As a girl, she had stood at the tunnel mouth in August and felt winter breathing out of the rock. 2 summers ago, she had started going back with borrowed instruments, not for sentiment, for a number. The quarry was not just an open pit. Below the flooded bowl, the old crews had followed the good ledge sideways into the hill. They left behind benched galleries, rooms of hand-cut limestone with stepped floors, dry above the waterline. Nell hung a small recording thermometer on the wall of the first gallery and a humidity sensor beside it. She swapped the batteries every month for a full year. The line the instruments drew barely moved. Deep rock does not feel the seasons. Past a certain depth, stone holds the average of the whole year's weather, summer and winter blended into one steady figure. In the Calder galleries, that figure was 54 degrees. It held in July. It held in January. It wandered less than a degree either side. 54 degrees meant nothing to a paving company. It meant everything to a cheesemaker. Cheese is not finished when it is made. A wheel of farmstead cheese has to age for months in air that stays cool and damp in the low 50s with humidity high enough to keep the rind alive. Get the room too warm and the fats weep and the flavor turns harsh. Too dry and the wheels crack. Too wet and the wrong molds take the rind. Aging rooms in old dairy country were caves for a reason, and a mechanical cooler that fakes those conditions burns electricity every hour of every day. The Calder galleries did it for free, and had been doing it for a century, for nobody. Nell had been making cheese in small batches for years, selling wheels at the farm market for many times what the same milk earned in the bulk tank. The arithmetic was simple and brutal. 100 pounds of milk in the tank earned grocery money. The same 100 pounds turned into aged cheese earned 10 times that, but only if the wheels had somewhere lawful to age. Her license capped her at what the little cooler in the milk house could hold. Every creamery in the region had the same ceiling. Most of them rented shelf space in one shared aging house 2 counties over, an old converted creamery building everyone just called the Cave, and there was a waiting list to get in. There was one more thing in the deed folder, and it was the thing Kessler never checked. The quarry did not reach the county road directly. It reached it by a haul road, a graded lane running down across the river flat to the state highway bridge. When the pit was working, the state had permitted that lane for loaded trucks at full legal weight, and the permit ran with the parcel. On Nell's side of the river there was no other crossing rated for heavy loads. The township bridges were posted at weights that would not carry a loaded milk truck, let alone a stone hauler. Merrick Paving had priced the rock in the ground. Nobody at Merrick had asked how they planned to drive it out. That was the mispricing, laid out plain. The county priced the quarry as delinquent taxes. The paving company priced it as worked-out rock behind a river. Nell priced it as the coldest rooms in 3 counties, with the only legal heavy road on her side of the water. 3 appraisals of the same hole in the ground, and only one of them had a year of data behind it. Knowing the number and using the number were 2 different sizes of decision. In March, Nell drove to the state dairy office and asked what it would take to license the first gallery as a cheese aging facility. The inspector, a careful woman named Dolores Fanning, did not laugh at her, which Nell counted as a win. She also did not make it sound easy. The rock walls could stay, but every working surface had to be cleanable food-grade material. The gallery needed potable water, drains, sealed lighting, screened ventilation, and a documented pest program. And before one wheel of cheese could legally age in that rock, the state wanted proof the environment held. Not Nell's word. Logs, continuous, recorded temperature and humidity, month after month, from calibrated instruments, reviewed on inspection. Fanning told her plainly that new cave applications usually died in the logbook. The rock doesn't have to pass, she said. The record does. The build-out estimate came back at more money than the Hartleys had ever borrowed at once. The bank would not lend against the quarry itself. A tax deed parcel with no comparable sales is worth whatever a lender fears it is worth, which is nearly nothing. What the bank would lend against was the herd. 80 milking cows, appraised animal by animal, stood as collateral for the stainless shelving, the plumbing, the electrical run down the tunnel, and the engineer's stamp on the ventilation plan. If the cave failed its logs, the note would still come due, and the cows would pay it. Tom signed under her name at the bank. Neither of them said much on the drive home. Kessler came back in April, and this time he brought a number with him. Merrick had won the bid to repave the state highway east of the river, and crushed stone was suddenly worth trucking. He stood at the quarry gate and offered Nell nearly 3 times what she had paid at auction. Clean money, 30 days, no contingencies. Take the profit, he said. You'll never see this offer again. Nell looked past him at the flooded bowl. Funny thing about worked-out rock, she said. It gained a lot of value over the winter. It was a good offer, and that is exactly what it proved. Merrick's engineers had finally looked at a bridge map. The offer was not for the rock. It was for her road. Selling would have paid off the herd note in one stroke. It also would have handed away the only thing that made her side of the river worth anything. Nell told him the quarry was not for sale. She did not explain, because an explanation is a free survey, and Kessler had already had one of those at her expense. All that spring and summer they built. Nell milked at 4, hauled shelving at 9, and scrubbed stone dust off food-grade panels until her hands cracked. The electrician ran sealed conduit down the old tram grade. A well driller cased a line to the gallery. Fanning inspected twice and failed the drains once, and Nell tore them out and set them again at the grade the code demanded. In September, the instruments were mounted, calibrated, and certified, and the log officially began. From that day, the quarry was on the clock. 12 clean months, or the application started over. The gallery itself did most of the work, just as the rock had promised. Through the hottest week of the summer, the wall thermometer never left its narrow band around 54. The compressor she had budgeted for backup never switched on. Visitors stepped out of 90-degree sun into the tunnel and put their jackets on inside 40 feet. Her first trial wheels, aged under her existing milkhouse license and moved in only for testing, came out of the gallery with rinds better than any cheese she had ever made. The cave was not merely as good as a cooler. It was better because it never cycled, never hummed, and never sent a bill. Then spring came, and the mountain tried to drown her. The thaw that year ran hard and early. Snowmelt loaded the hill above the quarry, and the water table rose into the fissures behind the gallery walls. Water that had politely stayed inside the stone all winter began seeping through seams 100 feet back from the tunnel mouth. The temperature held steady. The humidity did not. The log line climbed out of the ideal range and kept climbing until the air in the deep rooms hung at saturation and water beaded on the new stainless shelving. Mold bloomed gray on a rack of trial wheels in a single week. Fanning reviewed the March log and did not soften it. If the record showed the cave could not hold humidity through a spring, the license would be denied, and the note against the herd would still be owed. The obvious fixes were the expensive ones. A dehumidifier big enough for the galleries would cost like a second mortgage and would fight the rock forever. Sealing the seams was a fantasy. Water under pressure and limestone always finds the next seam. Nell spent 3 sleepless nights in the tunnel with a lantern, watching where the water actually went. And slowly she began to see what she was standing on. The gallery floors were not flat. Every room stepped down in long, shallow benches toward the tunnel, and along the foot of each bench ran a cut channel, half full of a century of silt and fallen grit. Her grandfather's generation had not left those channels by accident. Quarrymen fought groundwater every working day. They had cut the benches to break the floor into drained terraces, and the channels to walk the seep water quietly downhill to a sump by the tunnel mouth, where the old pumps once sat. The drainage system was already built. It was simply buried under 100 years of neglect. She hired no one, because there was no money left to hire with. Nell and Tom shoveled the channels clean by lantern light, room by room, night after night, hauling silt out in feed buckets. She set a small electric pump in the old sump where the steam pump had rusted to a shadow. The water stopped standing and started moving. Within 2 weeks, the seep was walking itself down the benches and out of the hill. The same route the masons had given it a century before. The humidity slid back into range and held there. The log recorded the whole event, the spike, the correction, and the recovery. Fanning read it in silence, then allowed herself one sentence. "You just proved the cave can take its worst month," she said. "That's worth more than a clean line." The 12th month closed the following September. The license came in a plain envelope, one page, signed and sealed. The first gallery of the Calder Quarry was now a certified cheese aging facility, the only licensed natural cave in that corner of the state. Nell moved her own wheels onto the deepest bench that same afternoon. It was a small harvest for 2 mortgaged years. The herd note still ate most of every milk check. If nothing changed, the cave would pay itself off slowly, wheel by wheel, over most of a decade. Then, in the first cold week of November, the Region's cave burned. The shared aging house 2 counties over went up on a Tuesday night. It had started life as a creamery and been retrofitted for 50 years, and the fire marshal would eventually blame a compressor circuit that had been carrying more cooling load than any inspector ever signed for. That was the quiet lesson in the ashes. A mechanical cave is a machine, and every machine is aging toward its last hour. No one was hurt. But 11 farmstead creameries lost their shelf space in one night, and some lost months of inventory with it. Aged cheese does not pause. Every wheel those families had in the make room still needed cool, damp, licensed air, starting immediately, or it would be sold young and cheap, or not at all. June Aldous drove over from the far township before the ash had cooled. Her family's creamery had 90 wheels of Tom on the burned shelves, and 90 more in the make room at home. She stood in Nell's kitchen with soot still on her coat sleeve. "The adjuster says the building was insured," she said. "The building. Nobody insures time. You can rebuild a shelf in a month. You cannot age a wheel back to where it was." Nell poured her coffee. "I have room," she said. "Licensed, logged, and cold. Same terms for everyone, posted on the door." June set her cup down half drunk. "Then I'd like to see the door," she said. Word travels at the speed of a co-op board meeting. On Thursday, Dale Pruitt's truck came up the haul road. Pruitt managed the same co-op that had outbid Nell for the hay ground at the tax sale, and his creamery members were the ones with wheels and nowhere lawful to put them. He stood at the tunnel mouth, felt the cold roll out of the hill, and had the grace to look embarrassed. "I hear you've got license space," he said. "We need it, all of it, if you'll deal." Nell was ready, because being ready was the whole point. Her lawyer had drafted the storage agreement back in the summer, quietly, for exactly this kind of morning. She walked Pruitt down the tunnel and let the rock make her argument. 54 degrees, logged and certified, with a copy of the license in a frame by the door. Then she laid the contract on the grading table and went through it line by line. Storage was priced per wheel per month, at posted rates, the same for every creamery, pinned to what the burned cave had charged, plus the cost of her compliance. No favorites and no gouging. A licensed monopoly that gouges its neighbors invites a competitor and deserves one. Every tenant logged their lots in and out, and her instrument's record went to every tenant monthly, the same log the state saw. The deepest bench stayed reserved for Hartley wheels. Pruitt worked through the pages slowly. "Same rate for us as for the 2 cow outfits?" he asked. "Posted on the door," Nell said. "Even after the hay sale?" She almost smiled, especially after the hay sale. "I'm renting you cold air, not settling accounts." And hauling came up the quarry's permitted road under her rules, scheduled hours, posted speeds, and an access fee that maintained the grade and the culverts. Pruitt read the road clause twice and looked up. "And if we'd rather truck around and cross somewhere else?" he asked. Nell shrugged. "There is nowhere else," she said. "Your drivers know that better than I do. That road is why the stone company wanted this pit, and it's why you're standing in it." Pruitt signed for the co-op before he left. By Christmas, 9 of the 11 burned-out creameries had signed the same posted terms. That winter, the tunnel mouth grew a rhythm. Refrigerated box trucks came up the haul road on Tuesday and Friday mornings, weighed against the road permit. and back to the loading porch Tom had framed where the old stone dock stood. Wheels went into the hill young and pale. Wheels came out months later with washed rinds and deep straw color, bound for city counters at prices that made the auctioneer's stock pawn joke into a story no one told at Nell's expense anymore. The road clause earned its keep too. The access fees regraded the lane in spring, recut the ditches, and replaced the culvert the frost had heaved. A permitted haul road is not a windfall. It is a maintained asset with a maintenance bill. And the contract made the users pay it. By the second winter, Nell needed hands she trusted in the tunnel. She hired the burned cave cellarman, who had spent 20 years turning and washing other people's wheels and had been sweeping a feed store since the fire. He walked the galleries once, read a month of her logs, and took the job on the spot. "Machines drift," he said, tapping the rock. "This doesn't." The co-op that had beaten her for the hay ground now paid her cave bill every month, and its members' cheese was the better for it. Kessler's crews, repaving the highway east of the bridge, bought their crushed base stone from a pit across the water and trucked it the long miles around. Merrick never called again. There was nothing left to call about. The following autumn, Fanning came for the annual inspection and stayed an extra hour, not for the paperwork, but for the arithmetic. The galleries were aging roughly 40,000 pounds of cheese a year, hers and her neighbors together, in rooms that had sat on the tax rolls as worthless. Fanning tapped the log binder on her clipboard. "Most applicants fight the rock," she said. "You're the first one I've passed who listened to it." Nell walked the inspector out through the racks in lantern light and stopped, as she always stopped, at the wall by the door. The same recording thermometer hung where she had first screwed it into the stone as a trespasser with a borrowed sensor. The needle sat where it had sat through every season since, a degree either side of 54. The quarry had never been a hole in the ground. It had only ever been priced by people who never asked what the rock already knew, and Nell Hartley had asked, and written the answer down for a year, and bet the herd on the record. The deepest bench in the hill carried her own label now. The cave kept its own weather, and it kept her family's too.